The following program is rated PG-13. Parental supervision is advised.
All right. Let me get my clothes on here and put my pants on. All right. Nobody's naked, right? All right.
Poseidon, the ruler of the seas and all that dwell within them. His rule over the oceans is unquestioned. There are those who serve him with tridents and with infinite knowledge of all things submarine. They are known by many names: coners, weaponeers, the merry men of Sherwood Forest. But by Poseidon himself, they are called the Subvets.
I attend a church here in Baltimore, Grace Bible Baptist Church, and one of our church members mentioned that she had an uncle named Freddie Warder. And I said, did you say Freddie Warder? And she said, yes. I said, you mean like U.S. submarine captain Freddie Warder? And she says, yes, how'd you know? Nobody knows that. I said, oh no, and to the contrary. He's the ultimate submarine warrior from World War II. He's just it.
Hey there, submarine fans. It's Eric from the subvet.com, and we're back with another great podcast of the Subvets. Dave Bowman is under the weather. He may or may not be joining us during this podcast, but we have an exciting guest for this podcast. It's Andrew Linn. He's a director and filmmaker, and he recently come up with a film with one of our most famous admirals, submarine admirals anyways, in the World War II, who his exploits were legendary, highly medaled, and just a lot of great information in the documentary that we're going to learn about Admiral Frederick Warder. So Andrew Linn, how you doing today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing just great. So, I got a chance to take a sneak peek at this documentary. I really enjoyed it. I learned some things that I wasn't aware of. Obviously, I mean, there's a lot of legendary captains that in World War II, and some of them are not with us anymore. A lot of them are not with us anymore because they've passed away at old age. Admiral Warder was certainly one of those that lived a very long life of 95 years, where he died in Ocala, Florida, which is my neck of the woods where I grew up as well. So might have run across them. Heck, you never know. You know, a lot of submarine meetings I went to around there. You pass by a lot of those old guys, and you don't even know who they are or what boats they said, unless they tell you. You sit down and tell you. Right. Some of them, they tell you they served in World War II, and it's great stuff. So how did you get involved with making this film? I mean, how'd you meet the family, and or how'd you come up with the idea?
Yeah, sure. So actually, I'm related to Fred Warder. He's my third cousin. So my mom is actually in the film, and she used to tell us stories about Freddie. But, you know how moms embellish, the history of, family history. So she would say things like, oh, your Uncle Dick invented the guardrail and things like this. And it's like, well, where's that guardrail money, man? I'm not seeing, I don't believe it. So, but she would tell stories about Fred Warder. And I just thought, another guy served in World War II. I didn't trust that what she was saying was true, these incredible stories about him. So anyways, we're in church one day, and she's talking about Freddie Warder, and a gentleman who's actually in the film, the associate pastor at my church. He's a World War II history buff, and he loves submarines. Oh. Yeah. He loves, he's well studied on all, submarine history from World War II. And he overhears my mom talking about Freddie Warder. And he goes, you know Freddie Warder? And she goes, yeah, he's my cousin. And he just flipped out. I mean, he was just so excited about it. And I was like, well, I guess there's something to this story. Maybe this is real. So I started to do my own research on Freddie. And yeah, it was, it was true. And there was more to it than she even talked about. I mean, she would talk more about him on a personal level. And just like what you were saying, I never got to meet him, but what you were saying, he was a humble man. If you met him, you wouldn't know that you were meeting, based on what I learned about him, you wouldn't know that you're meeting this guy who did all this stuff in World War II, all these fantastic, war exploits. He was just kind of a down-to-earth, humble warrior.
Yeah,
And so,
absolutely.
Yeah, and so
Well,
that's
that's how you met. I mean, that's a
Yep.
that's a great way to start it off. So, yeah, you come around, and a lot of these guys post-war. I mean, I remember growing up in the early '80s. So a lot of these guys were late in their mid '60s or so, somewhere in there. So they still had their wits about it. But they were building America post World War II. That's when America. I mean, all the infrastructure you see, and a lot of the fast food restaurants you see, a lot of the stores and stuff. These are all World War II veterans that come back, and some of them literally with just $10 in their pocket and an idea, and
Right.
just did incredible things. And yeah, most of them are humble, and unless you really talk to them, or like you said, meet through family or that guy. I mean, and that guy is in the film, the pastor.
Yeah,
unless,
right.
unless you meet somebody like that, you really don't know how important they are. I mean, I would have been one of those guys that would have freaked out too if you would have said, "What?
Right.
You got to be kidding me!" So yeah, I
right.
mean, I run across people even in my church, that they got to. Well, recently there was one guy passed away. Apparently, he was a submarine captain. I'm still trying to get some more information on that.
Oh,
He wasn't in the church, but I think his daughter, it was his daughter, gave me a few of his things. I mean, I thought she was going to give me some keepsake. No, she just gives me a bunch of submarine movies, but yeah, you're exactly right. So how did you get into cinematography as well? I mean, what's your background with making movies?
Yeah, so I've always wanted to be in TV and film since I was a kid, but on the other side, in front of the camera. But I just want to be involved in any way. So when I was looking at colleges, my mother actually found, doing a Google search, a school called Full Sail University. It's in Orlando, Florida. So another Florida, connection there.
Yeah,
But so I got my bachelor's of science in TV and film from Full Sail University in 2007. And then years have gone by. I was doing wedding videos and things like this, and they pay bills, but it's not, what I wanted to do, and it's not a lot of fun for me anyway. So, I heard this story, I thought it's a great name, Fearless Freddie. It's a great story. And I'm more of a storyteller. I'm not like a World War II history buff, or I'm not good with the, memorying a lot of details in terms of history. Right. I do like history. So I said, I think this is a great story, and this would be a great opportunity, particularly since I'm related to him, to tell his story. Because there's a lot of unsung heroes from World War II. And his story kind of reminded me of Desmond Doss, if you know him.
Oh, yeah. That was a great movie on that, too.
Yeah. So I had watched the documentary about him, and I was just like, wow, that's an incredible, crazy story. And, I think Fred has a similar story, not exactly the same, of course, but in terms of just courage in spite of fear, because he, though called fearless, he said in his interview with Clay Blair, who wrote the book Silent Victory, which is like a Bible of submarine history, he said, I was as afraid as anybody else when I was out there. So, I just thought he was courageous. For me, him as a character is just fascinating. And I really wanted to tell his story and honor him. And, but like you were saying, I mean, he's he's a dime a dozen from that generation. That's the greatest generation. They're called that for a good reason. They're, one of a kind. I mean, I was shocked to know that he, it's not included in the film, but, he had his, a degree in engineering from Berkeley, Fred Warder. And, it's like, oh, yeah. I mean, these guys were just like on top of everything. And he was, lieutenant commander of the Seawolf when he was a very young man. He wasn't very old, and he's a lieutenant commander. So, they were just a breed apart, these guys, back in those days.
So he was on board several submarines. That he graduated from Navy Academy in 1920. Was it 25?
Yes, that's
and
correct.
Yeah, I don't want to give you because I want people to watch the movie, obviously.
Well,
But you know, there's a story about how a lot of the submarine captains were relieved because of the post-war peacetime doctrine in World War I. It was the war to end all wars. So, you know, people just didn't imagine that anything that was going to happen. And World War I was a horrible war with the trench warfare. I mean, you know, hundreds of thousands of men slaughtered, you know, in unbelievable conditions. I mean, there's movies starting to come out about that too. People are researching that, doing documentaries, which is good, you know, because their service needs to be honored. Yeah, but a lot of the younger guys were relieved. I mean, older guys were relieved of command because they didn't want to take it to the Japanese. So that was a decision made by the Pacific Theater admiral in charge. I can't remember his name. Forgive me for that. But you know, he made it. When he just took over, and he made a decision to relieve some of these guys. But you know, your cousin there, Admiral Warder. I mean, he wasn't, for whatever reason, he wasn't all about that. He was going to take it to him. He was one of the older captains, being what was he, 37, 38?
I believe.
You know, he was skipper of the Seawolf from the commissioning.
Yep.
Yeah, going out, and it took 3-4 years, and again, this is not giving away details either, but, you know, he transferred off, and you'll hear in the documentary what he did for the rest of his career in the Navy. But, you know, the Seawolf is one of the 52 submarines that was lost in the war. So it was later, it was sunk by, and something, it's hard to believe even now, but it still happens today, but it was sunk by friendly fire, depth charge.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the boat's legacy lives on, certainly, with that, and we'll be honoring him. Something I found interesting in the watching the film was how it pays tribute also to the men on board. You know, he kept reflecting back how, you know, his men were just as important as he was. But that's all we hear about is, you know, the submarine captains, and not a lot about men. And movies, unfortunately, they falsely, you know, portray submariners, you know, as these guys that they're just waiting to tell what to do, and they don't. You know, these guys at 18 years old, and a lot of them with probably not even high school diplomas, you know, going out to the fleet, learning very complicated. I mean, these were probably the most complicated instruments of war created at that wartime, and you know, the sophisticated. You're with a bunch of great men doing great things. You got great captain, and when you put that all together, magic happens, or unbelievable things that you wouldn't expect to happen. So, I mean, so you were saying you were growing up with them, you know, just hearing stories, and you're like, you know, it's just my cousin, you know, it's just another story and stuff like that. But, you know, I post Navy, after he got out of the military, what did he do after the war? If you know any of
that. To be honest, I don't know too much other than he retired in Ocala, Florida, and just pretty much retired. You know, lived a good life down in Florida. So, yeah. But yeah, no, and you're absolutely right. All the men, I mean, I believe at the time they would have something like 80 men on those little tiny submarines, a crew of 80 people on, you know, very tight quarters. And they're much smaller then than they are now, and much less as sophisticated as they were compared to now, less so. And yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. You know, there's a verse in the Bible that says every part of the body is important, whether if you're in the body of Christ, whether you're the pinky, you know, the pinky toe. And same, you know, goes for submarines and their crew, just like is mentioned in the film by his former aide. You know, he said that there's a saying, and you might know this in the submarine culture, that you have room for everything but a mistake on a submarine. So, you know, and, yeah, I mean, it is one complex piece of machinery, and if everybody's not doing their part as they should, it's not going to be pretty, you know. And, you know, in those days, in World War II, we didn't have the most sophisticated military compared to the competition. Japan and Germany were, you know, they had some sophisticated stuff. And
that's good enough.
Yeah. And by the grace of God, we won. And again, it was the men, and it took courageous men like Fearless Freddie who did things that, you know, most people wouldn't do. If we didn't have that group of men, I don't know, you know, of that era, I don't know that we would have won. because like we said, I mean, something that is discussed in the documentary, not to give, like you mentioned, too much away, was the torpedoes at the time. We didn't have good torpedoes, and Fred, he would have had extra tonnage sunk if, some of these torpedoes were working. He was hitting ships and they just weren't going off. So, yeah.
I think he played one of the larger roles in fixing that torpedo problem, which is an interesting problem. And another reason to listen to the documentary, even if you're a submariner, I think you're going to learn some tidbits about the submarine technology back then, or maybe something you didn't know. So it's definitely worth a watch, even if you've been on submarines and you think you know all that history. It's there was just really interesting tidbits here and there. I'm like, wow, didn't know that. And, learning about the men. I mean, so that's part of it. So we're doing this podcast on Memorial Day weekend, and it's coming up on honoring the men and women that both died in the wars that America's fought, and obviously the ones have passed on now. So I know families, we get into the picnics and going out on trips and stuff like that, and instead of taking time and going to a local service, there's always a military veterans of different organizations doing some service. Some smaller towns still have parades, obviously, for Memorial Day. So it's it's important to remember all these men that did amazing things for our freedom. And for a long time they've been walking around us and we don't even know. And with the recent war, we've had a lot of tragedy. These guys have been over 20 years now, fighting over Iraq and Afghanistan. And now, we got ongoing potential wars with Russia and Ukraine. I mean, so it's just people don't realize what we put these young kids out there, and they're not that old, and they do amazing things. And now with the newer technology, which is extremely sophisticated, we like to say here on this podcast, Star Trek underwater. So I don't know if you've had a chance to tour a Virginia class submarine, but for us old boat sailors, and me saying old, but I was on boats built in the 60s, and you go on there and you're like, wow, it's flat screens everywhere. It's you fly with the joystick and everything else. But these guys were doing it with the technology, and you're right, it was lesser technology than what the Germans had, and which we learned a lot from their boats after we captured it. But it was the courage of the men that won World War II. And like I said, I think it's important that we take some time on Monday and we honor these folks.
Amen.
So I mean, your pastor, do you know this pastor yourself? Did you grow up with him at all, or?
So yeah, he's still the associate pastor of my church. I've been going to this church in Baltimore for about 12 years now, maybe.
So he's in Baltimore. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I live like 40 minutes from Baltimore, but I was living in Baltimore at the time, Baltimore area, when this whole story came up with Fearless Freddie and my associate pastor. And yeah, so he's still there. I still go there. And yeah, we've known each other about 12 years. And yeah, he's a huge history buff. I'd love to do a documentary about his great-grandfather. His great-grandfather helped found Nissan. And this is a white man from America. He was an engineer, and he wanted to start a car company, but he knew the competition was too thick in the United States. So he went out to Japan. This was before World War II. And he went out to Japan, and he helped. He had experience with cars, building cars and car companies here. So he went out there to be a consultant to Nissan, and he kind of helped start Nissan. So I'd really love to do that story, but he's not interested in helping me out on that one. So maybe I don't know, could offer him some.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. You hear these interesting stories, and sometimes it's, and you kind of throw them on, like me. Hey, I'm a podcaster. Would you like to come on to the podcast and discuss your story or your family story? You're like, hey, no. Well, can I just take your picture with you? And a lot of people don't even want to do pictures anymore.
Right.
But you come in and throw like, well, I got all my own camera gear and I know what I'm doing. I'm actually a filmmaker. Yeah, that's probably a little overwhelming to throw it. You probably have to ease them into it a little bit.
Yeah, right. Well, I was surprised by it because he was in the film and he did a great job. He's probably one of the best parts of the film. He's very energetic and he's great on camera. So I was hoping he would be willing to do it, but I'm not giving up yet. So I'm going to keep trying for it.
Yeah, his enthusiasm was just you kind of leached onto it. You couldn't wait for him to make his next comment. I mean, the way the guy talks about submarines, I'm like, this guy, on submarines himself, and that was my initial impression. I'm like, did this guy start run a boat somewhere, like a recent boat, and now he's a pastor? Because that happens,
Yeah, right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he never served, but you get the impression. Yeah, he does when we listen to him talking about it. It's as if he actually experienced it himself. But I think he's just read so much that it's like innate in him now to talk about it. He can just rattle off details about it and facts and all that kind of thing. So, but yeah, he was a big asset to the film, and I'm very thankful that he helped out. So.
So did you well, how about this? I mean, what all did you learn, you think, from making the film?
Oh, I learned a lot. I mean, do you mean anything specific, a specific area, like in terms of Fred or filmmaking or all the above? Or because this was my first full-length documentary. I've done documentaries in college, but they were shorts, and one after college. Mm-hmm. I learned a lot about filmmaking. I learned a lot about, obviously, Fred Warder. I learned a lot about the Navy and the submarine culture. Yeah, the submarine community. I got involved with the Navy Submarine League, which I don't know if you're familiar with, but they're based.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, they're a nonprofit, I think, based in Arlington or Alexandria, Virginia. And, just being around these guys was fascinating. I mean, there's a gentleman in the film, John Alstrom, and he's a current, submariner. And he actually was on a modern version of Virginia class USS Seawolf. So the same namesake as what Fred Warder was on in World War II. Just talking to a guy like that, and learning, I mean, I don't know if this is true. Is it true that to be on a submarine, you have to take a test to make sure you can handle, the stresses of being underwater for 3 to 6 months at a time? Is that accurate?
That is accurate amongst a whole battery of other tests. So it is a volunteer service. So you just don't get surprised one day and go, "Oh, you're going to submarine." They ask you multiple times. You realize you're volunteering for this. By the third or fourth time, you're like, "Am I sure I want to do this?"
Yeah.
But the testing and training is intense. So for my there was different rates. For mine, it was almost 2 years before I even got to the boat. So it's that's how long the schools were, because you're training on old 60s technology. Well, it was 50s technology going into the 60s. So they were computer like, so they were more like an analog 1 to 0 binary, and they transitioned into digital, some of the digital stuff on there. So there's just a lot of intense training. So even after you get to the evals and stuff in submarine school, that's mostly where that's done, where you're medical, and then they put you through a flooding and fire trainer. I mean, there's some great documentaries on that. You can see what these guys, you just type in submarine flooding trainer or submarine fire trainer, you can see what they do with these guys. So those are more things to make you think, is this what I want to get to? But it also, it's awesome training because there's a lot of realism to it, especially with the newer trainers.
Okay.
To get you into it. So you met a lot of guys from USSVI. I'm thinking too.
Not a lot of guys, but yeah, I met some guys from there.
But a lot of submariners in the Navy submarine. Yeah. So I mean, what was there anything else that surprised you? During researching and meeting people to make this film?
Yeah, some of the technical side of like the submarines, like back then. I mean, I'm a complete novice when it comes to this, so I didn't know that those were, I'm learning about the engines at the time. It's a diesel, engine, and and I believe how was it charged? Like it charges batteries, right? The diesel engine at the time. So, they'd have to rise to the surface, let it charge for a certain amount of time, and then go under because the battery engine or the batteries are quieter than the diesel engine because it's so loud. Learning things like that. Like there's one tiny toilet for 80 people. These little details are just, sleeping under and above torpedoes. I thought that was pretty crazy. I thought, we went on USS Bakuna to film in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And there's no way. I mean, just being in there and seeing everything and all the dials and the things you got to turn. And, Steve Trent Smith, who's an author of a book called Wolfpack, who's in the film. And, he's a historian and knows all about this stuff. He was teaching me a lot on the boat. He's the one who told me about the diesel engines. And, it's like, I don't know, 1,600 horsepower. And so, just everything about submarines themselves of the time and the era. And the fact that they're just submersible boats, actually. They're not even, an actual submarine, more or less. That's pretty impressive, too. So the technical side, learning that to me was very, very interesting. I just had no idea about all this stuff. So.
Yeah. So, I was wondering what World War II boat that is. So for anybody watching this podcast, there is a numerous amount of World War II boats that are on display. I know in Charleston, South Carolina. And then you got, one of them I know is rusted away. They might be pulling out. You got the one in Alabama. There's one in Texas. I think there's another one in Arkansas that they dragged it up the Mississippi River. I think that's the Badfish, and a few on the West Coast as well, including there's one that's kind of more modern that sort of looks like the 60s nuke boats, but it was a diesel that they got tied up to. I think Portland, maybe. I have to look that up. So it's when you get into the community, you start learning things about it, because I think that's the problem. A lot of people are, when they hear about submarines, they just go, wow, that's just something just the fact that they're going, that's just something I could never do. And so they just get overwhelmed with that, and then all the training and all the gear that you learn. That's definitely what it is too. So let's tell us about the film, where to see it and when it is available and how to see it. I know where I saw it, but maybe you can tell me more of the venues and and where it might be previewing pretty soon, what platforms.
So it's on you can get a DVD or Blu-ray of it on www.fearlessfreddiemovie.com, and Freddie's FREDDIE. It's not with a Y. So it's fearlessfreddiemovie.com. So you can get the DVD and Blu-ray there. And on the DVD and Blu-ray, there's, bonus features that I didn't include in the film because I just couldn't fit it in. There wasn't good places for it to fit, but there are other interesting stories about Freddie, him meeting JFK, him and Don Ulmer, his former aide, on a boat in Louisiana, shooting an alligator, things like this.
Right.
Yeah.
So I might know something about that.
So very funny stories. I just couldn't find a place to put them in here. But there's the bonus features. But you can also watch it on Amazon, Amazon Prime, Tubi, YouTube. So Vision Video is distributing it currently. So they have it all over the place. Pretty much anywhere, you can watch a video, you're going to find it. So whether streaming,
widely distributed.
It's widely distributed on streaming services. It's at Best Buy, Walmart, Target, all that kind of stuff. So,
I think.
Sorry,
I was just going to say it's probably a great documentary to. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it's probably a great documentary to get your hands on this weekend And then, you can't get the DVD right away. Like you said, it's on a lot of streaming platforms. And that's where I purchased it, was on Amazon Prime. So,
Okay, great. Yeah.
yeah. So, I mean, it must be a lot to go to all these different venues and, negotiate with them on how to, get the films on these different platforms. Cause there's so many out there, it's hard to keep track. Well, you being a filmmaker, I'm sure that, that's something you've really gotten into and learned to know. Obviously, even when you got your bachelor's degree, internet was probably not so hot like it is now, but you've probably learned that as you go with the times. So what is the one thing you want people to get from this film?
I want people to get from this film that, there are many men throughout history, and particularly in this country, that are more than simply, they're more complex. They're not one dimensional, like you're saying, the movies where it's, oh yeah, you just have a hero and the bad guy. Well, this was a hero who loved his enemy. This was a hero who saw his enemy as his brother. This was a man who was humble, but he did his job. As a lieutenant commander in World War II, he did what he was supposed to and then some. But on top of that, he loved his enemy. He would, he cared enough. He believed everybody's people. And, it's better to make friends with people than make enemies. War should be the absolute last option. But, so I just want people to know that Fearless Freddie was a great man. He's somebody people should know about, and people to some degree should emulate. So that's what I think I want people to know.
That's well said. Well said. And I appreciated it. There's like a gospel message in this film, which they kind of get more into, and it kind of goes along with that generation. On top of being humble, just great all around people, all around. Most of these guys very helpful. When I was growing up, I mean, I learned a lot of stuff. I mean, how to fix a car and stuff from relatives, World War II guys. My whole family's got a dense military history. So yeah, okay. Well, I appreciate you being on the podcast today. This is director and filmmaker Andrew Linn again. We're gonna put some links to. He's on the IMBD. I think he's got a profile on there, and we'll put some links and information to Admiral Frederick Warder as well, and link to the Fearless Freddie website for more information on the film, where to purchase it, where to buy it. I think there was a drop down list on there. It's a very well made website, so I think you'll enjoy it and go to that. And from there, I wanted to mention one thing I wanted to bring up. I forgot about this tidbit. So, we were talking about these humble guys coming out of the country at the time, and in the country they said it wasn't as densely educated as it is now. Not a lot of people had college, obviously. So he comes from West Virginia, which. Yeah. A lot of people go from West Virginia. I can only imagine what the jokes were like back then. but there was another. So a lot of famous people come out of World War II that served in World War II. Another one was Chuck Yeager. So, these people come from backwoods, good old country towns. Good people, great culture, and I think that goes along with what we said in this podcast too. That made these incredible people that. Fought and won World War II for us. So again, this is director Andrew Linn. Any last thoughts?
Yeah, just about West Virginia. He's from Grafton, West Virginia, and they built a bridge in his name, Rear Admiral Frederick Burdett Warder Bridge in Grafton. So yeah, he's very sophisticated guy, like you said. I mean, he came from a tough background, country, poor, and he rose above the task. He did a lot, and yeah, so
great. Yeah, it's a great story, great documentary, and I appreciate how God just brought this whole thing together. Obviously, is what it sounded like for you, and you were able to make this film and get that out there, because it's the younger generation that's doing the job to remember these old great veterans that that did amazing things in World War II. So, yep, this is director Andrew Linn, and I am Eric Rao from the subvet.com. You can also get a hold of our news feed on Facebook. You can go to Facebook.com/group/the sub vet. You can also go to it's the sub vet on Twitter/the sub vet. And my email is eric@thesubvet.com. And also you can get a hold of Dave Bowman at Slippery Fish. I think it's Dave Bowman at slipperyfish.com. I can't remember. He's going to put it in the notes. He's also going to put I don't remember what it is. DolphinDave at slipperyfish.com. And then we're going to put in the notes to the links to our website and groups as well, and more great information on this podcast. So Andrew Linn, hey, it was an honor interviewing and listening to the story that you gave today. This gives a little bit more insight into the making of the film, and I really think this is going to touch a lot of people to where they're going to go out and hopefully see this and learn a little bit about the men and the war machines, especially submarines. And that's what we're all about here at the Sub Vets. So appreciate you being here, and hopefully we can invite you back for another submarine film someday. So.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be cool. And everybody join the submarine force.
Yeah, maybe I just went out and saw Top Gun, obviously. That's the reason I'm doing it too. I saw it in '86, right down, and it changed my mind from Air Force right to Navy. I'm going to go fly up. Fortunately, didn't work out that way. Went underwater instead. Long story.
Yeah. You saw the new one, though? Did you see the new one?
Yeah, I already put like a little video. I said, you got to go see it. It's just better to keep here. Yeah, it's better just not to say anything, and just people need to go see it. So it was definitely worth it.
Right.
Yeah, did a great job. So.
Okay,
So, again, this is Eric Rao with the Sub Vet with Andrew Linn, and we'll see you next time on the Sub Vet.